when the narcissist realizes the empath has learned their language. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. In today's episode on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore one of the most powerful turning points in human relationships. The moment when the empath finally learns to speak the narcissist's unspoken language. This isn't about manipulation or revenge. It's about awakening, about seeing through illusions and reclaiming your emotional freedom. Have you ever noticed how, once you understand someone's patterns, they can no longer control you? That's the moment Jung called illumination, when awareness replaces confusion. As you listen, reflect on your own relationships and ask yourself, have I been reacting to someone else's script, or am I ready to write my own? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight may be the very key that helps another empath awaken. 1. The moment of awakening. When an empath begins to understand the narcissist's psychological language, their patterns of manipulation, emotional control, and unspoken strategies, a profound shift takes place. The balance of power begins to crumble, and the game that once kept the empath trapped starts to dissolve under the light of awareness. This is the sacred moment Carl Jung described as the meeting of the conscious and the unconscious, the instant when you finally see what has been hiding in plain sight. The empath, who once reacted with guilt, fear, or over-explaining, now pauses, observes, and responds with quiet detachment. That silence, the very silence the narcissist once used as a weapon, becomes the empath's new strength, an act of spiritual rebellion that says, I see you, but I no longer serve your illusion. This is the moment of awakening, where spirituality and psychology merge into one powerful realization. You can't heal someone who benefits from keeping you confused. The empath, once ruled by compassion without discernment, begins to embody conscious empathy, an empathy rooted in truth, not fantasy. You start to recognize that every guilt trip is a mirror reflecting your own unhealed need for approval. Every charm offensive is a test of your inner boundaries. Every silent treatment is an invitation to return to your own inner peace. The narcissist's tactics don't vanish, but they lose their potency because your energy no longer feeds the cycle. This is not revenge, it's liberation. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating your shadow, your pain, and your light into one unshakable presence. And yet, this shift is not without turbulence. When the narcissist senses that their control is slipping, they often escalate using emotional chaos as a last attempt to pull you back into the web. They may provoke, manipulate, or withdraw entirely, hoping your old fears will resurface. But something in you has changed. You no longer seek validation in the storm. You have found it in stillness. What once felt like punishment now feels like proof of your growth. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, not the absence of darkness, but the mastery of how to stand in your light without needing to extinguish anyone else's. Through this new lens, the empath begins to see energy as it truly is: vibrational, transparent, and interconnected. You realize that what you once mistook for love was often control disguised as affection, and what you once offered as healing was actually self-sacrifice born from a wound. True spirituality teaches discernment, to love without losing yourself, to forgive without re-entering harm, to hold compassion without becoming someone's emotional host. You stop chasing closure from people incapable of honesty because your inner clarity becomes the closure. You stop explaining your worth to those addicted to power because your calm presence now speaks louder than any defense. The narcissist, faced with this transformation, is left standing before a mirror they can no longer manipulate. The empath they once drained has become self-contained, radiating an energy too balanced to exploit. Their usual tactics of blame, projection, and flattery no longer land because consciousness cannot be deceived. This is not the empath's revenge, but their resurrection. The energy that once spiraled in confusion now flows upward in awareness. The empath's frequency rises, and with it, the illusion of control shatters completely. What remains is a quiet sovereignty, a peace so deep that it becomes untouchable. This is the higher truth of spirituality. When awareness expands, manipulation dissolves, and the awakened empath no longer reacts. They simply exist in truth, radiant, free, and beyond the reach of shadow. Have you ever recognized the exact moment your soul woke up, when you finally saw through manipulation and chose your peace instead? If you have, share your story in the comments below to inspire others on this path of awakening. If not, comment, "I'm ready to awaken," and let this be the moment you step into your own power. 2. Manipulation as control of inner territory. Carl Jung revealed that the narcissist's communication is never about intimacy. It's about power. Their charm, their silence, their sudden bursts of anger are not spontaneous emotions, but strategic tools designed to invade and dominate the empath's inner territory. They study your responses, mirror your emotions, and manipulate your compassion until it becomes a leash around your soul. The empath, by nature, wants to heal and understand, but this very instinct becomes the narcissist's playground. Every gesture, every word, every silence from them is a means of control, a way to make you question your own worth, doubt your own memory, and slowly surrender your sense of reality. Yet there comes a sacred turning point in spirituality and spiritual growth the moment the empath awakens. When you finally recognize that their patterns are mechanical, not personal, you step outside the game. You begin to see their manipulation as a reflection of their own emptiness, not your inadequacy. Their charm no longer enchants, their silence no longer intimidates, and their rage no longer defines the rhythm of your heart. When you reach this level of awareness, you start to see their behavior as a system, predictable and repetitive, lacking the depth it once seemed to have. You realize that they don't want connection, they want control. Their compliments are currency, their affection is a transaction, and their pain is a weapon. But once your perception sharpens, you stop reacting. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing to prove your purity to someone who profits from your guilt. This is the first breath of freedom, the awakening of your inner authority. Jung described this as individuation, the process of becoming whole by withdrawing your energy from the illusions of others. You begin to master the art of inner neutrality, the ability to stay calm even when provoked. This calmness is not weakness, it's sovereignty. It confuses the narcissist because their entire identity relies on reaction. When you refuse to play their emotional game, their control dissolves like smoke. Now, you operate from presence, not fear. You speak less, but see more. You feel their projections, yet refuse to absorb them. You understand that every manipulation they attempt is a mirror reflecting where they are still unhealed. And through this understanding, you transmute pain into wisdom, reaction into awareness. Spiritual growth teaches you that you cannot fight darkness by entering its arena. You dissolve it by holding your light steady. The narcissist loses power not because you fought back, but because you stopped needing to prove that you were good. You stopped letting their behavior define your peace. You learned that empathy without discernment becomes self-betrayal, and compassion without boundaries becomes captivity. In this awareness, you reclaim your mind, your energy, your inner sanctuary. The narcissist may still perform their illusions, but you no longer attend the show. What once ruled you now reveals itself as empty repetition, and you, the empath, evolve beyond their reach. No longer a target, but a mirror, too clear for deception to survive. Comment below. I protect my inner peace. If you're ready to take back control of your emotional territory and no longer let manipulation define your energy. 3. Individuation and shadow literacy. Recognizing manipulation is not just an act of awareness, it is the birth of individuation, the sacred process Carl Jung described as separating your true self from the unconscious influence of others. When you begin to see through manipulation, you awaken to both the narcissist's darkness and your own hidden wounds, the craving for approval, the fear of abandonment, the confusion of chaos with love. This moment of clarity is not about judging them. It's about realizing how deeply you once allowed someone else's shadow to dance with your own. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung said, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Every time you notice manipulation and no longer react as before, you're taking back your power from fate itself. You're no longer a passive participant in someone's psychological drama. You're the witness, the observer, the one who has finally learned the language of the shadow. And this is what spiritual wisdom truly means. Not escaping darkness, but reading it fluently. When you learn the narcissist's language, you begin to understand the structure of their tactics, their guilt trips, silent treatments, and emotional traps, and something shifts inside you. You stop dancing to their rhythm. The hooks that once pulled you into endless cycles of emotional chaos now lose their grip. Their anger, their charm, their sudden affection no longer confuse you, because you can see the machinery behind it all. You've stopped reacting, and that's when they panic. They sense the energetic disconnection. They feel your peace as a threat, your clarity as rebellion. But this is not revenge. It's evolution. The moment the empath stops absorbing pain and starts reflecting truth, the dynamic collapses. The narcissist no longer sees a mirror. They see a mystery they cannot manipulate. Yet the deeper truth is that this awakening is not just about them. It's about you, meeting your own shadow with compassion. The reason you once tolerated manipulation wasn't weakness. It was unhealed love. You mistook saving others for loving yourself. You thought peace was found in keeping the harmony, even when it cost your soul. But now, you see that empathy, without boundaries, becomes self-betrayal. The spiritual awakening Carl Jung spoke of is not soft or sentimental. It's fierce clarity wrapped in grace. You begin to realize that you can love people and still walk away, that you can forgive them and still protect your energy. You no longer confuse understanding with tolerating, nor peace with silence. When the empath learns the narcissist's language, they no longer need to speak it. They've transcended it. Their silence becomes their message. Their boundaries become their protection, and their stillness becomes their highest vibration. You stop trying to prove your worth because you finally remember that you were never meant to beg for love that must be earned through suffering. The real battle was never against the narcissist. It was between your wounded self and your awakened self. And once the awakened one takes the lead, manipulation loses all meaning. To see through illusion is to become free from it. That is the moment when your peace is no longer a strategy, it becomes your natural state. You no longer seek validation from others, because the only approval you need is your own awareness. You are no longer defined by the shadows you've survived. You are illuminated by the light you've reclaimed. 4. The recognition crisis. When the narcissist realizes they have been decoded, their entire sense of self begins to collapse like a fragile mask exposed to truth. This is what Carl Jung referred to as the dark night of the soul, a stage of deep psychological and spiritual crisis where the false self can no longer sustain its illusions. For years, the narcissist has hidden behind manipulation, charm, and control, constructing a facade to protect themselves from their own inner void. But when that mask shatters, when their language of guilt, silence, and emotional warfare no longer controls the empath, they are forced to confront the emptiness they've spent a lifetime running from. Their entire identity, once built on power and validation, begins to dissolve. What follows is not just emotional chaos, but a spiritual reckoning, where shame and suppressed wounds rise from the depths of the unconscious, demanding to be seen. In spirituality, this collapse is not punishment. It is the beginning of awakening. The moment the soul is stripped of illusion so truth can emerge. In that moment of exposure, the narcissist feels an unbearable tension between who they pretend to be and who they truly are. The manipulative strategies that once ensured dominance, gaslighting, silent treatment, emotional triangulation, lose their potency when the empath stops reacting. The empath, through their own spiritual awakening, has learned the unspoken code of manipulation and no longer feeds the narcissist's ego with emotional energy. This shift creates what Jung might call a psychic inversion. The power dynamic flips, and the narcissist finds themselves lost in a maze of their own projections. They begin to see that the game is over, that control no longer grants them safety, and that the person who once absorbed their pain now reflects it back like a mirror. It's a terrifying revelation because it exposes the narcissist's dependence on others for identity, a truth they can neither accept nor escape. Some respond with rage, others with denial, and a few disguise their collapse behind spiritual language, claiming to be enlightened while still avoiding the inner work that true transformation requires. Jung warned about this illusion, calling it spiritual inflation, when the ego uses the language of spirituality to maintain its superiority rather than surrender to humility. The narcissist may begin quoting wisdom or adopting spiritual postures, but their energy reveals the truth. Beneath the surface lies unhealed shame, masquerading as enlightenment. Yet even this false awakening serves a purpose. Every facade that fails brings them closer to the moment of surrender, when they must finally confront the darkness within. True spirituality, after all, does not bypass pain, it transforms it. Meanwhile, The empath stands as both witness and survivor of this unraveling. Their own journey is one of emotional liberation and evolution from codependency to consciousness. They realize that peace does not come from fixing the narcissist, but from reclaiming their power and refusing to participate in energetic manipulation. Their compassion becomes mature, guided by discernment rather than guilt. They understand now that real love cannot exist without boundaries, and that spirituality is not about saving others, but preserving the sacred connection to their own soul. As Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The empath has made the unconscious conscious. They no longer dance to the narcissist's tune because they have remembered their own rhythm, the rhythm of truth, awareness, and self-respect. In this recognition crisis, both souls stand at a crossroads of transformation. The narcissist, stripped of illusion, faces the abyss of self-knowledge that could either destroy them or set them free. The empath, having transcended the cycle of control, enters a higher state of spiritual awakening, where awareness replaces reaction and peace replaces chaos. This confrontation between shadow and light, ego and soul, is not the end, but the sacred beginning of authenticity, where manipulation dissolves and consciousness becomes the only language left to speak. Don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights on mastering emotional awareness and understanding the hidden psychology behind human behavior. 5. The dark mirror temptation. As the empath begins to awaken, there comes a powerful temptation hidden within the shadows. The urge to use the narcissist's own tactics against them, to return the silent treatments, the guilt trips, and the emotional manipulation that once caused so much pain. It feels almost justified, as if turning their own darkness back upon them could restore balance. But Carl Jung warned of this dangerous illusion. He called it shadow possession, the moment when the soul, in trying to defend itself, becomes entangled in the very darkness it sought to overcome. The empath may believe they are reclaiming their power, but what truly happens is that they begin to mirror the very energy that once enslaved them. It is not liberation, but imitation disguised as control. And this is where the real spiritual test begins. The path of spiritual growth demands awareness without imitation, strength without cruelty, power without domination. It's easy to think that awakening gives you permission to fight fire with fire, but true mastery means refusing to become what wounded you. When the empath evolves, they realize that their gift is not in manipulation, but in perception, the ability to see through illusion without losing compassion. The moment you start to control or punish as they did, your light dims, your energy becomes reactive, and you unknowingly feed the very system of control you once escaped. Jung's wisdom reminds us that what you resist persists, and when you resist the narcissist by playing their game, you remain bound to them energetically. Real power is silent, not because it fears confrontation, but because it no longer seeks validation from the same darkness it has already transcended. To be awake is to observe their behavior without absorbing it, to respond with calm awareness instead of emotional retaliation. This is where spirituality transforms into strength, when your energy no longer bends to their chaos. You stop reacting, and in that stillness, something miraculous happens. Their control evaporates. You become untouchable because your peace can no longer be manipulated. That is the true language of the awakened empath, not words of revenge, but the vibration of inner equilibrium. You learn to see through their patterns, to recognize their pain without inheriting it, to set boundaries not from anger, but from sacred self-respect. Yet the shadow still whispers. It tempts you with the satisfaction of making them feel what you once felt. It tells you that justice is mimicry, but imitation is spiritual decay. It's the soul forgetting its own light. Jung understood that the greatest danger is not the existence of the shadow, but identification with it. When you identify with the shadow, you lose your authenticity, your softness, your essence. But when you acknowledge it consciously, when you can say, "I see this darkness in me, and I choose differently," you transform it. You turn poison into wisdom, wounds into insight, pain into power. That is the true alchemy of the empath's journey. So the lesson is clear. Awakening is not about revenge. It's about transcendence. You don't win by outplaying the narcissist. You win by outgrowing the game. The empath's highest power lies not in manipulation, but in mastery, not in controlling others, but in governing one's own inner world. That is the essence of spirituality. To stand in awareness so complete that nothing external can shake your peace. When you understand this, you no longer wish to make them suffer. You simply rise beyond their reach, grounded in truth, glowing in quiet strength, free at last from the need to mirror their darkness. 6. Conscious detachment and intuitive immunity. Healing truly begins when you learn the art of conscious detachment, the ability to see manipulation without letting it penetrate your soul. You no longer drown in other people's chaos, nor do you take responsibility for emotions that aren't yours. Instead, you become the observer, calm and aware, able to read the language of control without reacting to it. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Through spiritual wisdom, you start recognizing how much of your pain was simply unawareness, mistaking empathy for duty, compassion for submission, and love for endurance. But as your awareness expands, you begin to see clearly that healing is not about proving your goodness. It's about reclaiming your peace. This clarity gives birth to something deeper than intuitive immunity. It's an invisible shield formed not by resistance, but by deep understanding. You start sensing toxic energy before it enters your emotional space. You no longer explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, nor chase validation from those who thrive on your confusion. You stop reacting, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown the game. Jung believed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that truth becomes your quiet weapon. Each manipulation attempt becomes an opportunity to strengthen your emotional mastery. You realize that your calm unnerves those who once thrived on your chaos, and your silence speaks louder than any defense you could ever give. As this inner transformation unfolds, emotional sovereignty becomes your natural state. You stop needing to fix, to please, to rescue. You begin to honor your own rhythm, guided not by guilt, but by intuition. Spiritual wisdom reminds you that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction disguised as kindness. So you start loving differently, not less, but wiser. You can hold compassion and still walk away. You can understand someone's pain and still protect your energy. You no longer confuse endurance with loyalty. You have learned that peace is not avoidance. It is presence without attachment. And when a narcissist realizes you've learned their language, something profound happens. Their tactics lose power because your consciousness no longer feeds their illusion. You see through their charm, their guilt trips, their emotional bait, and instead of reacting, you simply detach with grace. They speak in manipulation. You respond with silence. They seek drama. You offer stillness. Jung called this the process of individuation, the moment when you integrate shadow and light, no longer defined by projection or fear. You become your own source of validation, no longer swayed by emotional storms around you. This is the sacred turning point where an empath becomes untouchable, not through coldness, but through clarity. Conscious detachment allows you to love without losing yourself, to care without carrying what's not yours. Intuitive immunity becomes your spiritual armor, forged through experience, compassion, and truth. You have stopped being reactive and started being responsive, moving from emotional chaos to divine composure. That is the silent revolution of awakening when peace becomes your language and presence becomes your power. If you've reached this point, it means you're learning the power of conscious detachment. Comment below, "I'm centered," to affirm your emotional freedom, and don't forget to subscribe for more Carl Jung inspired spiritual wisdom to strengthen your intuitive immunity. 7. Healing and relearning authentic connection. The empath's true healing begins when he starts to unlearn the very strategies that once kept him alive. The constant hypervigilance, the people-pleasing, the quiet anticipation of someone else's moods. These patterns were armor once, but now they are chains. And in the journey of spirituality and spiritual awakening, freedom begins when you no longer confuse survival with love. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This truth echoes deeply for the empath, who has spent a lifetime navigating chaos as if it were normal. When you stop trying to manage everyone's emotions and finally face your own, you begin to speak a new emotional language, one built on honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. It feels strange at first because peace feels unnatural after so many years of internal storms. Yet it is in this strangeness that transformation takes root. As you begin to heal, something inside you resists. The silence feels heavy. The calm feels suspicious, and your nervous system searches for the familiar turbulence it once called home. You may even crave conflict because peace feels too still. But this discomfort is sacred. It is the body learning that safety does not mean danger is coming, and that love does not have to hurt. In this space, your spirit begins to remember its natural rhythm. Slow, grounded, steady. The constant scanning for danger fades, and instead of reading others to survive, you start listening to yourself to live. That is the beginning of authentic connection, not built on fear, but on presence. In this stage, spirituality stops being an idea and becomes an experience. You start to notice that true love requires no performance, no rescuing, no sacrifice of self. The empath who once carried the world on his shoulders learns that peace is not emptiness. It is power. The more you honor your truth, the more your relationships change. Some people fall away from those who needed your chaos to feel significant, but in their place, come connections rooted in equality and respect. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of shadow and light, the moment when you stop chasing validation and begin living from your own center. This relearning is not gentle. It will test your patience as you rebuild your sense of self without guilt. You will notice how your body relaxes when you are no longer pretending, how your mind clears when you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Slowly, the urge to fix others dissolves, replaced by the desire to simply be whole. This is how the empath reclaims his energy, not by closing his heart, but by keeping it open only to what is true. And in that quiet, something profound happens. You feel peace, not as a temporary relief, but as a state of being. The empath, who once lived in reaction, now lives in alignment. The chaos that once defined you no longer has power because you have learned to understand its language and no longer respond to its tone. This is spiritual wisdom in motion, the realization that healing is not becoming someone new, but remembering who you were before the world taught you to shrink. It is a homecoming to yourself, a return to authenticity where connection flows naturally, without fear, without control, without masks. And though it feels unfamiliar, it is the truest form of peace your soul has ever known. 8. Individuation and collective healing. When the empath reaches the point of individuation, something profound happens, and your compassion becomes conscious. You no longer absorb everyone's emotions as your own. You begin to understand that love without limits is not love, it's self-erasure. This new awareness transforms your energy. Instead of reacting to pain, you respond with clarity. Instead of trying to fix what's broken in others, you hold space for them to choose healing. Carl Jung called this the essence of human evolution, becoming a whole individual capable of loving without losing the self. In this sacred maturity, empathy no longer drains you, it grounds you. Your presence no longer feeds manipulation, it reveals it. You start attracting people who respect your energy, who meet you where you stand, not those who feed off your light. This is spirituality in action learning, that compassion is not about suffering with others, but shining in front of them so they can find their way. As you embody conscious empathy, your nervous system softens, your inner world steadies, and your voice returns. The anxious need to explain, to fix, to be understood begins to fade. You start hearing your authentic voice again, the one that was buried under guilt, noise, and people-pleasing. The old hooks that used to pull you into others' chaos lose their power. You are no longer reactive. You are rooted. This is the subtle but powerful shift from survival to sovereignty, from confusion to conscious choice. Jung saw this as a turning point in the collective psyche, where humanity evolves not by dominance, but by awareness, not by manipulation, but by authenticity. You realize that freedom isn't found in controlling others. It's found in outgrowing the need to. And as your inner world transforms, the outer world responds. Your peace becomes magnetic. Your silence becomes your statement. And your energy begins to filter who can truly walk beside you. Those who cannot match your frequency fall away, not because of rejection, but because resonance no longer allows distortion to stay. Every boundary you hold is a declaration of self-respect, and every act of self-respect ripples outward, teaching others how to love without control. This is how individual healing becomes collective healing. Your example shows that it's possible to be soft yet strong, kind yet firm, spiritual yet discerning. True spirituality is not escape, it is embodiment. It is the art of returning to yourself so deeply that your very presence becomes medicine for the world. In this awareness, manipulation no longer tempts you, validation no longer defines you, and chaos no longer fascinates you. You are free, not because you've mastered the game, but because you've stepped outside of it. You've remembered your authentic rhythm. You live not to please, but to align. You love not to earn, but to express. That is the real victory. The moment when empathy matures into wisdom, when compassion gains backbone, and when the soul finally remembers its own sacred language. That is spiritual growth in its truest form, the awakening that teaches you that the most powerful healing begins when you stop trying to save others and start embodying the wholeness that saves the world through you. When an empath learns to see through manipulation, something profound happens. Peace replaces reaction. Awareness replaces confusion. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The moment you recognize the patterns, you reclaim your power. Let this be your reminder that healing doesn't mean hardening. It means learning the language of truth. So, in your daily life, notice what energy you respond to and choose presence over reaction. Have you ever experienced that moment when someone's control no longer works on you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might awaken someone else's light. And if this message from spiritual wisdom spoke to your soul, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep walking your path of awareness and inner strength. The 7 archetypes that reveal your true self. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Carl Jung's timeless words remind us that true transformation begins within. In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore the 7 archetypes that reveal your true self and guide you toward personal growth and happiness. As you listen, think about which archetype speaks to your own journey. Could it be the hero, the sage, or perhaps the creator? Share your reflections in the comments, because your insights may inspire someone else walking the same path. 1. Persona, the mask. The persona, often called the mask, is one of Carl Jung's most profound insights into human nature. And when viewed through the lens of spirituality and spiritual awakening, it becomes more than just a psychological concept. It is a mirror of how we navigate the world and a reminder of the delicate balance between protection and truth. The persona is the social face we create to move safely through society. A mask carefully shaped by culture, family, and expectation so that we may function as workers, friends, leaders, or children in harmony with others. It is not inherently false, for it often helps us build trust, form relationships, and create pathways of belonging. But its danger lies in the illusion that the mask itself is who we truly are. Too often, people confuse this role with their essence, and what was once a bridge becomes a prison, silencing the authentic self behind layers of performance. To understand this more deeply, picture how you move through a single day, bold and efficient at work, gentle and playful at home, contemplative and honest in solitude. None of these are lies, yet none of them capture the full truth of your being. They are masks, expressions adapted to the environment, but the soul remains greater than any single role. Jung warned that when we cling to the persona as identity, we abandon the richness of the inner life, surrendering depth for approval. This is why spiritual wisdom reminds us that awakening requires not the destruction of the mask, but the recognition of its proper place. The persona is a bridge, not a destination, a doorway through which the self can carefully engage the world while still holding to its eternal essence. In practice, this means pausing to notice when you are over-identifying with a role, asking yourself in difficult conversations, am I speaking from my truth or from fear of rejection? It means observing moments of people-pleasing where the mask grows heavy and choosing instead a small act of authenticity, a sentence that reveals your true values, a boundary set without apology, or a pause to breathe before replying. These simple practices loosen the grip of the persona and remind you that while masks may shift, your core remains unchanging. When the persona is kept in its rightful place, you adapt without losing yourself, connect without collapsing, and protect without pretending. This shift is not merely psychological, but spiritual, for it awakens the nervous system to rest, drains away resentment that comes from living behind false layers, and allows the creative current of the self to flow freely again. The moment you reclaim the mask as servant rather than master, you begin to feel a deeper alignment, where your outer life reflects your inner truth. Journaling about moments when the persona felt too tight, practicing honesty in one small interaction, or breathing into stillness before presenting yourself to others all become acts of spiritual awakening that transform everyday living into a practice of self-realization. And as you master this first archetype, you prepare yourself to meet the deeper truths of the shadow, the anima and animus, the wise guide, the trickster, the hero, and ultimately the self, each one unveiling another layer of spiritual wisdom and carrying you further on the path of awakening into the wholeness of who you truly are. Comment below. I remove the mask and embrace my true self. If you are ready to step beyond the persona and live authentically. 2. Shadow, the hidden self. The shadow, as Carl Jung revealed, is not a monster hiding in the dark, but the hidden self that carries repressed fears, unspoken desires, unacknowledged impulses, and yet also holds the very strengths and gifts you have not yet discovered. It appears when you lose control in moments of anger, jealousy, or fear, when dreams confront you with strange and unsettling symbols, or when you notice yourself trapped in cycles of sabotage and repeated mistakes. It feels like an enemy working against you, but in truth, it is a part of you waiting to be seen, acknowledged, and integrated so that you may become whole. Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this is why the shadow must be faced, because ignoring it gives it power, but embracing it sets you free. Every overreaction is a whisper from the shadow. Every destructive habit, a signal of what you have hidden, and every dream filled with haunting images, a message calling you to look within. This hidden self does not exist to punish you. It exists to teach you, to reveal what you have not yet healed. The journey of spirituality and spiritual awakening often begins here by daring to look at what has been suppressed. Though uncomfortable, this confrontation liberates you, because only when you recognize your shadow do you begin to reclaim the energy, passion, and creativity that have been locked away with it. Jung saw this process as the path toward individuation, the integration of light and dark, where you stop pretending to be only what is acceptable and instead embrace the totality of who you are. The shadow is a room within your soul, filled not only with fears, but also with treasures, and to keep the door shut is to remain incomplete. To open it is to find both the wounds that ache and the wisdom that heals. This is why great thinkers, artists, and visionaries often transform their pain into their most powerful creations. Rumi once wrote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you, and this is the essence of shadow work. The very places you avoid are the same places where your deepest growth and transformation can occur. What you resist continues to control you, but what you accept transforms into strength. By meeting your shadow with honesty and compassion, you awaken a new level of consciousness where you are no longer a victim of unconscious forces, but a conscious creator of your destiny. The shadow reveals itself in the cracks, in the wounds, in the hidden desires. And when you dare to embrace it, you step closer to wholeness." Carl Jung's timeless spiritual wisdom teaches that the shadow is not a curse, but a mirror, not an enemy, but a guide. And the moment you integrate it, you discover your truest self, the self that is both light and dark, broken and whole, human and divine. Comment below, "I embrace my hidden self," if you're ready to face your shadow and step into your true power. 3. Anima/animus, inner feminine and masculine. The anima and animus, as Carl Jung described, are among the deepest truths of the human psyche. For they are the inner archetypes that connect your conscious self with the vast ocean of the unconscious, and they show that spirituality and spiritual growth are not about choosing one side of yourself, but about bringing harmony between both. For men, the anima is the hidden feminine within, the energy of sensitivity, intuition, emotional depth, and inspiration that society often teaches them to silence. Yet when honored, it allows them to feel more deeply, to create more authentically, and to connect with others beyond logic alone. For women, the animus is the inner masculine, the archetype of reason, structure, direction, and determination that, when embraced, gives her strength to stand firm in her truth, clarity to pursue her vision, and discipline to bring her dreams into reality. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you cannot truly become yourself until you allow these inner counterparts to work together rather than against one another." When men suppress their anima, they often become overly rigid, cold, or detached, unable to process emotions with compassion, while women who deny their animus may feel powerless, hesitant, or lost in dependence on others. But when you integrate these two forces, balance is born. This is why every relationship in your life acts as a mirror, showing you the anima or animus qualities you have not yet accepted in yourself. Spirituality reminds you that the people you love or resist often embody the very traits your soul is asking you to embrace. Instead of projecting unmet needs or unhealed wounds onto others, spiritual growth invites you to reclaim these qualities within and transform relationships into sacred opportunities for harmony and depth. A man who honors his intuition alongside logic becomes not only intelligent, but visionary, while a woman who unites her compassion with strength becomes not only nurturing, but also a leader capable of inspiring and guiding others with wisdom and clarity. This inner marriage of masculine and feminine energy is the key to living as a whole being. For love cannot be fully given or received if parts of yourself remain rejected or unseen. Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And the anima and animus are precisely the unconscious forces waiting to be recognized so you can reclaim your destiny. Wholeness is the goal, for wholeness unlocks creativity, peace, freedom, and authentic love. When you embrace the anima and animus, you discover that your soul was never divided. It was only waiting for you to unite its halves, so that strength flows with sensitivity, reason moves with intuition, and direction walks hand in hand with inspiration. This is the path of integration, the path of true balance, and the essence of spirituality and spiritual growth. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on balancing your inner feminine and masculine energies with Carl Jung's timeless insights. 4. Hero, the inner warrior. The hero, the inner warrior, is the force within you that dares to rise when everything inside trembles. The courage that walks into storms instead of hiding from them. The fire that faces chaos not as an enemy, but as a teacher. This archetype represents the raw bravery to confront fears, crises, and uncertainty. And it teaches us that true strength is never the absence of fear, but the conscious decision to move forward while fear lingers in the background. In the journey of spirituality and spiritual awakening, the hero becomes a symbol of transformation, because every struggle you endure is not punishment, but an initiation, a necessary burning away of the false self, so that the truest version of you may emerge. Like iron tempered in fire, the ego you once clung to built on approval, perfection, or protection crumbles, making space for the birth of an identity rooted in authenticity and wholeness. To walk the hero's path is to step willingly into discomfort, to name the dragon that guards the gate of your destiny, to face not only external battles, but the shadows within you that whisper doubt, shame, or limitation. The hero reminds you that individuation, the process Carl Jung described as becoming whole, requires meeting the unconscious with open eyes, refusing to bury your wounds, and learning to integrate them into your story. This is why the hero's journey is not just a myth, but a living truth. The fall and the rise, the death of the old self, and the rebirth of the new, the descent into darkness, and the return with wisdom. Each challenge, each heartbreak, each betrayal becomes a training ground, teaching you to regulate your emotions, to stand firm in your values, to set boundaries that protect your sacred energy, and to take bold action even when clarity has not yet arrived. The hero lives in your daily choices the moment you speak your truth instead of staying silent. The moment you try again after failure whispers, "It's not worth it." The moment you choose integrity over approval. The moment you show up for your own life even when no one is watching. In these small acts of bravery, you begin to embody the hero's essence, transforming not only yourself, but also inspiring others who see your light. And as you continue this journey, you come to realize that the true battle was never about conquering the world outside, but about conquering the resistance within. Because the hero's victory is not loud triumph, but quiet mastery, the strength to keep walking, the faith to keep believing, and the willingness to die to who you were in order to become who you were always meant to be. Did this inspire your inner warrior? If so, comment hero below to keep growing together on this journey. 5. Great Mother, the origin. The Great Mother, as Carl Jung described, is one of the most powerful and timeless archetypes because she embodies the mystery of creation itself. She is the nurturing womb of life, the source of protection, fertility, and abundance, the gentle embrace that allows existence to flourish, and the soil from which all growth arises. In her presence, you feel the deep comfort of unconditional love, the kind that holds and sustains you even when the world outside feels harsh and uncertain. Yet at the same time, her shadow is unavoidable. For the Great Mother is not only the giver of life, but also the taker, the force that can suffocate, consume, and destroy. Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that every archetype holds this paradox, that in order to truly awaken to the depth of life, we must be willing to embrace both its nourishing and its devastating sides. To understand the Great Mother is to accept the rhythm of nature itself, where life and death are inseparable, and creation is born only through destruction. Just as the seed must break apart before it can grow into a tree, so must certain parts of ourselves die for new aspects of our being to come alive. The way up and the way down are one and the same, said Heraclitus. And this truth reflects the very heart of the Great Mother archetype. She teaches us that endings are not final, but necessary, that death is not an enemy, but the hidden doorway to rebirth. In this way, she carries both tenderness and terror, both comfort and challenge, because to remain in her embrace forever would mean stagnation. Yet to resist her cycles is to deny the essence of growth itself. In your own life, you may have felt her presence in the warmth of care that allowed you to thrive, perhaps through a parent, a mentor, or life itself offering you protection. But you may also have encountered her shadow when that same care became controlling, when protection felt suffocating, when love turned possessive. This duality is not a flaw, but the essence of her nature, for she embodies the totality of existence, not just its pleasing aspects. Jung once said, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all in a certain sense insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown." The Great Mother reflects this truth. She does not provide easy answers, but demands that you grow through paradox, that you stretch beyond comfort and accept the cycles of birth and death, gain and loss, nurture and destruction. The lesson she carries is one of profound spiritual awakening. To walk with the Great Mother is to recognize that you are part of an eternal dance, that within every loss lies the seed of something new, and within every beginning is the whisper of an ending. She is the fertile earth and the storm, the giver of abundance and the destroyer of illusions, the loving embrace and the fierce push toward transformation. To resist her is to cling to illusions of permanence, but to accept her is to step into the flow of life itself, where you learn to trust that every destruction clears space for renewal, and every ending opens the path for rebirth. This is the paradox of her archetype, the spiritual wisdom Carl Jung revealed, that only by holding the opposites together can you awaken to the wholeness of your own soul. 6. Divine Child, the new beginning. The divine child is not just a poetic image of innocence, but the deepest reminder that within you lives a power of renewal that never dies. A light that rises even in the darkest hours of your life, carrying with it the promise of rebirth and new beginnings. It appears after seasons of chaos, after moments when everything seems broken, and whispers to your soul that the story is not over, that healing and growth are still possible. This archetype represents the pure center of your being, the untouched essence that carries both vulnerability and resilience, the quiet voice that reminds you of your future potential when all else feels lost. It is the spark of creativity, the seed of joy, and the sacred innocence that allows you to dream again, even after disappointment, to love again, even after betrayal, and to trust life even after storms have swept through your existence. Carl Jung often spoke of the child archetype as both fragile and immensely powerful, because it embodies the paradox of human life. It is delicate, yet it holds within it the strength to renew the entire self. When you connect to the divine child, you connect to that unshakable core of hope that chaos cannot destroy. It is not about blind naivety, but about the courageous purity that refuses to let despair be the final word. Just as the earth renews itself in spring after the long silence of winter, your spirit also holds an eternal rhythm of regeneration, and the divine child is the force that awakens it. It teaches you that spirituality is not a straight road, but a cycle of endings and beginnings, and that every setback, no matter how painful, carries within it the seed of transformation. It reminds you that true power is found in the ability to begin again, to release the old wounds, and to step forward with faith into a life not yet lived. As Rainer Maria Rilke beautifully expressed, "And now we welcome the new year, full of things that have never been," pointing to the truth that each moment holds infinite possibility when seen through the eyes of the child within. This archetype calls you to protect your innocence, to preserve your capacity for wonder, and to nurture the fragile but powerful beginnings of transformation with tenderness and care. The divine child also carries a profound lesson about healing. Sometimes growth requires you to return to simplicity, to listen more closely to your inner voice, and to honor the needs of your soul with gentleness. It invites you to accept vulnerability, not as weakness, but as the sacred doorway through which rebirth enters. When you allow yourself to begin again, you align with the natural rhythm of life itself, where dawn always follows night, and renewal always follows destruction. By embracing this archetype, you learn that chaos is not your enemy, but the soil from which new life emerges, stripping away what no longer belongs so that your truest essence can shine through. The message of the divine child is that no matter what you have endured, you carry within you an unbreakable potential for spiritual growth, for creativity, and for authentic joy. To honor the child within is to honor the compass of your soul, guiding you toward continuous rebirth, reminding you that in every ending lies the seed of a beginning, and in every beginning lies the chance to become more of who you truly are. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Comment below, "I embrace my divine new beginning," to affirm your journey of growth and transformation. 7. Self, the wholeness. The self is the deepest and most mysterious archetype, the very center of the psyche where all paths eventually converge, and it holds the promise of true spirituality and spiritual awakening. It is not about becoming perfect or escaping the flaws of your humanity, but about recognizing that your wholeness is formed by the union of opposites, the light that reveals and the shadow that conceals, the masculine that pushes forward and the feminine that receives and nurtures, the rational mind that plans and the instinctive body that simply knows. These forces, which often appear to be in conflict, are not meant to cancel each other out, but to complete one another, creating a balance that brings depth and harmony to your being. To walk toward the self is to accept that you are not one-sided, but multifaceted, not defined by fragments, but made whole through integration. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming yourself, is not about striving for some polished perfection, but about living in authenticity, where you allow your true essence to shine through without hiding behind masks or bending to the expectations of others. It means facing your shadow without fear, honoring both your strength and your vulnerability, speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, and embracing the paradoxes within you as parts of a larger and richer story. The self does not emerge through struggle or control, but through surrender, a willingness to stop forcing and start listening to the wisdom already alive inside you. This journey begins with acceptance, the gentle act of meeting yourself where you are without judgment, and deepens with inner alignment, where your thoughts, feelings, and actions gradually learn to move as one. Each time you allow contradiction to become complementarity, you draw closer to the self. Each time you choose integrity over image, presence over pretense, you step into that sacred center. It is in these moments of honesty, surrender, and alignment that life ceases to feel like an endless battle and begins to unfold like a flowing river returning to its source. The lesson is simple yet profound. The self is not something you must chase or construct. It is the quiet wholeness that emerges when you integrate all that you are. And in living from this center, you discover the heart of spiritual awakening. As we come to the end of this journey, through Carl Jung's 7 archetypes, we've uncovered how each one acts like a mirror, reflecting hidden parts of ourselves and guiding us toward a deeper understanding of our true identity. These archetypes are not just abstract concepts, but practical tools that you can apply in your daily life to grow, heal, and find greater happiness. Which archetype do you feel speaks most strongly to your own life right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at Spiritual Wisdom as we continue exploring the paths that lead to self-discovery and transformation.